That is my opinion.
Okay, thank you. No?
So, as I thought about as we get to the end of this process, it made me think about the beginning of this process, at least during my time on the council. And believe it or not, the starting point was not whether to keep or remove the dam. The starting point was people had begun to notice a decline in the quality of the mill pond. And so a small group of us got together. I know Kenny was on it, myself, Todd, April, Mike Lynch, I think, Jim was on it. And so the question really was, what can we do to improve the water quality of the mill pond? And so, believe it or not, one of the starting suggestions is, well, let's open the gates at the winter. We'll lower the water level down. We'll kill the vegetation, freeze it off, and then we'll close the gates again. The water quality will improve. And it sounded like a really good idea. Mike was a little nervous about it. He's like, well, the gates are in pretty bad shape. We'll be able to close them if we open them up. And I don't know who suggested, but somebody finally said, maybe we should actually check if that's a good idea, rather than just doing it and seeing what happens. And so that really started us down this pathway. And the first study was, is it a good idea to actually open the gates and lower the water down? And it turned out actually it was not a really good idea. It actually increased scouring, added more sediment to the impoundment, and was counterproductive to what we were trying to accomplish. And so having done that, we said, okay, what's next? And I heard a comment about the VHB first RFP, and I can't believe it was 2019. But when we sat down with VHB, VHB wasn't a dam removal consultant. VHB at that point was very clear that you're entering down a pathway that's a really challenging pathway. And it really requires you to do comprehensive studies of all the options that are at your disposal. And I was like, really? Okay. And I couldn't believe how expensive this study was that we were going to start on, because I didn't realize how extensive the actual study was to get to what they were talking about. And they were right. And it's like, as we moved through this process and they did their initial study, I thought it was pretty remarkable that after we'd spent all of that money, we paused for a second and said, wait a second. Is it possible, and we came back to the original question, not whether we could remove the dam or keep the dam, but could we fix the water in the impoundment? And so we spent the money on a supplemental study, and as we spent the money on the supplemental study, what was abundantly clear is not that most dams are unsustainable structures and are going to fill in over time, is that the mill pond is a particularly egregious one. The size of the impoundment versus the size of the watershed meant that it was extraordinarily challenging, bordering on impossible, to begin to lower down the nutrient levels to move the lake, to move the impoundment from its current condition and improve the water quality. And so really, when you looked at that, we weren't going to improve the water quality. And so it really became, was it the health of the river system versus trying to retain the dam? And the dam itself, I'm a relative newcomer to New England. I've only lived in Durham 23 years. I've only driven by the dam, I don't know, many thousands of times. And it's really been my water gauge. I always look at the amount of water that's spilling over the dam. That kind of tells us if we're in a drought or things are going well. And it is an extraordinarily beautiful thing to look at. But as Carden pointed out, when we looked at what it would take to fix the dam, the basic historic structure of the dam we've really kind of lost. Because it wasn't maintained and because it was neglected, the changes that we were putting to the dam really meant it really wasn't the original historic structure that we were trying to preserve. That tipping point had already passed. And so when I think through this, I do believe that the right action is to remove the dam. But unlike what has been done in the past, sometimes we say, okay, we're going to take this action and then we'll move on and we'll forget about the dam because we've already removed it. We've wiped our hands of that. I think what was really important in our studies is, or in these studies that came to us, is how critical watershed management is, how complex watershed management is, and how challenging it is in Durham because we have so many rivers and wetlands that are here. And so I think really the removal of the dam really is the first step in the next process. And I think when Dennis Meadows said, well, we could keep the dam and it would be great, or we could remove the dam and it can be great, I think in order to be great, it means we have to have a commitment as we remove the dam, first of all, to do the invasive species work that they said, and also then to begin to do the more challenging task, which is going to be the watershed management. Complex because it deals with lots of private property, complex because it deals with multiple communities. But I think that's really the direction that we need to move forward. And so I see this personally as the first step in a longer effort to improve our watersheds. That's my decision.
Thank you. Chuck?